Many people assume that this exercise is the same as this exercise or even this. However, all of these exercises are actually very different, and one is more effective at building muscle than the other ones. So today I'm going to share the 4 key principles that define an effective exercise. And the final principle is the most crucial for an effective exercise. These 4 criteria have been proven to cause more muscle growth and increase gains. And using these principles has completely changed my confidence in the gym and got me happy with my own program. Alright, the first principle that makes an exercise effective is mind-muscle connection. Or in simple terms, how good an exercise feels. This is a very straightforward idea, and while there really isn't much science to it, it's still an important thing to consider if you want your workouts to feel good. If an exercise feels good, that means you are comfortable while doing it. You don't feel any pain on your joints, you achieve a good muscle contraction, and gives a good pump at the end. Conversely, you'll know an exercise doesn't feel good if you're annoyed of doing the exercise. On a side note though, if you're annoyed of doing an exercise in the first place, do yourself a favor and swap it out for a different exercise. You're going to feel so much better. The next principle is good overload potential. What is overload potential? This is how far ahead you can keep progressively overload a specific exercise. Essentially, how much weight you can keep adding until you have to swap the exercise for another one. So the more weight you can put on in the future before having to swap the exercise is how good the progressive overload potential on that exercise is. For example, let's compare cable tricep pushdowns, which have worse overload potential than the single arm pushdown variant. In cable tricep pushdowns, you're using both arms to push down the weight, which means that you can push more overall weight and your exercise goes up in weight faster. However, if you're using a single arm variation, you're only using one arm, which halves the total weight you're using, and weight increases slower since you're only relying on the strength gain in one arm versus 2 arms. Right, now that we've covered mind-muscle connection and overload potential, the next principle is resistance profile. In simple terms, resistance profile is how challenging an exercise feels throughout its range of motion. Think of it like this: you're doing standard bicep curls and the weight doesn't feel so challenging at the bottom, but as you keep going up, it starts getting very challenging at around 90 degrees, and then it keeps getting easier on the way up. A good resistance profile looks something like this. The exercise is most challenging when the muscle is most stretched, and if you're using free weights like dumbbells, then the exercise would also be its least challenging when the muscle is least stretched. Almost all machines are most challenging when the muscle is most stretched, which is a good thing. If you want to pick effective exercises, then you want to pick an exercise with a good resistance profile. Alright, now let's finish up with the final but most crucial principle. For an effective muscle building exercise, the number one thing you have to consider is the stretch. When you work out a muscle in a stretched position, something magical happens. Studies have shown that applying resistance to muscle in the most stretched position leads to more muscle growth than if you were to do the opposite, applying resistance to the muscle in its most contracted position. Let's take, for example, preacher curls. At the bottom range of the motion, the muscle is most stretched and it's the most challenging part due to how leverage works. And as the muscle keeps contracting more and more, the muscle starts facing less of a challenge to move the weight. This is ideally what we want from an exercise. Now that we've gone over the 4 key principles that make an exercise effective at building muscle, we can use them to figure out whether an exercise is optimal or not. Okay, right now I'm stuck on which one I should pick: machine chest flies or cable chest flies. So let's go through this step by step. Both exercises offer great stretch for the muscle. However, I think the cable variant sometimes offers a great stretch. The cable variant has greater overload potential since I'm only using one arm per cable stack. Both exercises have a great resistance profile, although you are more likely to cheat the range on the cable variant. And lastly, the cable variant just feels better for me. As you can see, the cable variant gets more points, so it's the better exercise that I would pick. Alright, this wraps everything up on how to pick exercises for muscle growth. So remember to use these 4 principles when you're programming your next workout to make sure you get the most gains out of it. And let me know in the comments which of these principles surprised you the most, and I really appreciate you watching all the way to the end. But before we end off, remember that training hard and training consistently matters more than the exact exercise you pick. And always find a way to hit the gym even if you don't feel like it.